So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is a map that we haven't seen in quite a while, though we have seen it several times before. This is of course the Citadel of CARN DUM. This may also be another map which in the next version of the game is actually getting a bit of a facelift, so this may very well be the last time that we see this version of CARN DUM, that classic wedding cake layout that several settlements do have within the game, but perhaps none more so than CARN DUM. It's very clear the three tiers that the defenders can operate from, and the theme that we're going to see today is the Arnorian petty kingdoms on the side of good, reinforced by Imladris. So presumably they have marched to an abandoned CARN DUM only to find themselves beset on all sides by the Witch King's minions, or well, at least the forces of evil, and we shall go through the forces of evil as they are surrounding the Citadel itself. First of all, starting off with Kalin at 2008, who's playing as the forces of Rhudaur, so the subjugated Arnorian petty kingdom that marches in favour of evil. Rhudaur swordsmen making up the first line of their army, so a dependable unit of line infantry. There's nothing too special, especially considering that Rhudaur do have many of their roster can be considered very good damage dealing units. The Rhudaur swordsmen are not one of those by any means, but relatively cheap for what they offer, and of course very numerous when they're on maximum unit settings like this. So over 200 warriors are ready to crash down upon the walls. Just in behind we have the Rhudaur clansmen, which in many ways actually are a even more dependable unit because they have got the bigger shield value. They can have their armour upgraded as well, albeit Kalin does not have the resources to spare for that on this occasion. Anti-cavalry bonuses all well and good, better defensive aspects of spears in melee all well and good. Though you will say that obviously the spear malice does hurt them when it comes to an infantry slog, which many sieges can turn into, so they do have that working against them. Just in behind we've got some Dunland pikemen. Even the cheapest of pikes in a siege situation like this can be incredibly useful, just for the fact that they can really anchor your line in place. They will of course be very vulnerable to any defensive missiles that they may perceive, but if they can be committed either later on or even earlier, to be fair, they're cheap enough to the point where even if they do get shot up, at the very least they are taking bullets that others will not be. Speaking of which, the Arthedain pikemen, the stronger unit of pikes that Rhudaur have at their disposal, not only are they better in melee in every way, but if they do have to be subjugated to arrow fire, those little round shields that they have do make them just that little bit more resilient in that regard as well. A fantastic unit really, and probably the most underrated unit in the Rhudaur roster. People who play the game regularly will probably know how effective they can be, but I feel as though much of the attention Rhudaur gets is on their throwing projectiles, rightly so perhaps, but the Arthedain pikemen are a very, very dependable unit in the middle of their roster. Speaking of which, here are some of their throwing projectiles. The Attenmore's Troll Hunters, very, very strong armor-piercing javelins that they throw, of course, and they also somewhat run counter to the classic Rhudaur weaknesses, because among the Rhudaur roster their armour is actually pretty good. They have a decent shield value as well, and in many ways they can be considered another aspect of the Rhudaur clansmen in melee, because they're also spears. So a very multifaceted unit this, and it's very rare that you'll see Rhudaur go without them. We've got a few archers as well, the Rhudaur marksmen, which with their expanded ammunition repertoire, they very often will be firing right up until the point where they're either forced off the field via routing or just outright killed to the last man. A couple of units of them, and we also have some Witch Realm Enslavers, a very, very strong unit of bodyguard tier shock infantry, and any armoured units on the defence, which considering their fellow Arnorians are there, they'd be right to be scared of the Witch Realm Enslavers, and doubtless we will probably see some hidden units such as Arthedain Rangers and Trollshaw Axe Throwers pop up throughout the battle as well. Moving on, we have Leech playing as Isengard, so they've marched a fair way, and to be fair, if Isengard managed to march this far north, then it may be that the last vestiges of the Free Peoples of Middle-earth are actually taking shelter in some of the old monuments of their opponents. Isengard here with some Uruk-hai raiders pushing their ram up, very, very similar actually to the Rhudaur swordsmen in many ways, very dependable, very numerous, but not the best line infantry unit in terms of outright quality, but Isengard at least do have some other options for that. Dunland clansmen among the basic militia units, especially among the evil factions, they're never going to be able to kill off enemy units en masse with quality or damage, but good at dealing with cavalry, and they are at least numerous and cheap. We've got more Uruk-hai raiders there, and this is the unit that I was talking about, of course, the Uruk-hai infantry, one of the classic units of Isengard, that triumvirate of pikes, crossbows and infantry that they often bring. and the Uruk-hai infantry are very, very good for a line infantry unit for their cost as well. They can outperform individually, at the very least, many of the Western Kingdoms of men. They may struggle going up against the higher end units that the Arnorians can bring, and of course Imladris can certainly outperform Isengard for quality, but that's where their just efficiency comes into play as well. Good armour, good damage, just a good all-round unit. Half-Orc Baneguard, so they of course can also bring several units of armour piercing when fighting under the banner of Isengard. The Baneguard are the most expensive and arguably the least efficient of the trio actually, but armour piercing in any form will be useful against Arthedain and Cardolan today. Already spoken about those Uruk-hai Raiders. Just in behind we have all of the bodyguard units Isengard can bring. We have the Nazkai, a very strong unit of armour piercing bodyguard troops as well. Stronger even than the Witchram enslavers that we have already seen. Berserkers aren't really a bodyguard tier unit, but they do have a third hit point, which is a rare enough thing for infantry, but they have no other defensive values to speak of, so once those are gone, they will fall away pretty quickly, but while they're up, those armour-piercing blows they will be striking will be very, very useful to the attacker's cause, and the Guards of Orthanc, a very high-tier unit of very, very solid spears, and a full lineup of Uruk-hai pikemen here as well. No crossbows by the looks of things, which is an interesting omission, but perhaps they would be a little bit more difficult to use in this sort of situation anyway. Moving on to Dunland, commanded by Her Tumehai. We have some more Dunlanding clansmen, we've already mentioned them. A catapult, which is right on the front line, and Carn Dûm does have arrow towers, so I'm not sure whether the catapult will actually survive being this close. Indeed, you can already see some arrows lodged into the dirt here. Some Dunlanding clansmen pushing up the ram, pushing up the siege towers. We've got the Half-Orc Spear Guard, omitted from the Isengard roster, but very often Dunland will bring them because they are the most defensible unit of line troops that they can bring. So, very, very often you will see them comprise Dunland's front line, and the Baneguard we've already seen from Isengard. Same thing applies for Dunland, only they don't have the several options of basic armour-piercing shock troops that Dunland have, so if you're going to bring that kind of unit, then as Dunland you only have the one choice. Dunman pikemen we've already seen for Rhudaur, of course, and again, you don't really have too many options when it comes to bringing basic pikes as Dunland. If you want them, this is them, otherwise you're out of luck, I'm afraid. And then a couple of units of Spears of Orthanc as well. Expensive to go into the red limit on bodyguard units, but if you're going to do it with any faction, it will be as Dunland, because the discrepancy between the two Orthanc units and the rest of the roster, Blackwolds aside, is really quite stark. But yeah, fantastic unit of crossbows, and good multiple HP spears in melee as well. That's all we can see of the Dunland roster, but doubtless they have got plenty of hidden units as well. Moving on to the next army, we have Angmar themselves trying to reclaim their old capital. The Witch King sending forth his minions with the Witchram Blackguard on the front, so his personal guards themselves. We've got the Hammer Guard as well, which with their armour upgrade, we've already seen a couple of this kind of unit already. Bodyguard tier, armour-piercing shock troops, very, very scary. Guardians of Carn Dûm and Witchram pikemen without the armour upgrade, but still very, very solid even in spite of that, and both of them will do a very, very good job. Should it come down to a slog, which Angmar would back themselves in the vast majority of cases if that were the case. Blackwatch Legion as well, give them that real burst when it comes to trying to break a line up. If the enemy line is starting to falter, send forward the Blackwatch Legion, and it should be smashed to splinters in double quick time. Scourge Raiders as well, with those throwing axes, represent yet another throwing projectile, which the defenders will have to be very scared of. Guardians of Carn Dûm, we've got the Snaga Stalkers pushing up the ram, the Trolls, which Angmar of course can bring 2 units of more heavily armoured Trolls, so gives them perhaps a little bit more of a damage spike, and the Angmar Halberds as well, which are cheap and cheerful, with extra armour piercing damage of course combined with that phalanx. And last, but by no means least, in spite of what many people may think, we have G-Man, who's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, so goblins of course, very, very numerous, and heavy goblin spears add in a little bit of armour piercing into the deal as well. We've got some goblin infantry pushing up the ram. They've got a fair ways to trek actually, the Misty Mountains, which I'm sure there will be a cut involved in this battle as a result of that. Another artillery piece as well, so 2 catapults for the attackers today. We'll see if the Misty Mountains can use theirs effectively. Of course, Dunlands may have placed theirs right in harm's way of those arrow towers, so they may need to. Warg Riders will make the process of sallying out with defensive cavalry a little bit more treacherous, though they do have a little ways to gallop before they actually get in to help defend their allies. Heavy Goblin Infantry and Halberds as well, rounding off the full lineup of Heavy Goblin melee troops. None of them are especially effective in melee relative to their peers, especially not the heavy goblin infantry, you'd have to say, but numerous, cheap, and they will get the job done ultimately. More heavy goblin infantry there, heavy goblin archers as well as crossbows, so all of the heavy goblins are on display. Standard goblin archers, the whiter fearmongers offering that armour-piercing phalanx. Cave trolls on the side, which of course can smash through lines very, very quickly. And at the back, the general's bodyguard, going to be the ever-dependable Goblin King's bodyguard. Now then, moving into the settlement itself, as we find ourselves in the moat, we have got 2 times who's playing as Cardolan. He's the one who sent me this battle replay. He sent me a fair few, actually, and this is the first of his that we're actually going to be seeing as we come to the end of 2022. He's got some Dunedain captains here, unsurprisingly. Thieves of Tharvad in a 5v3 like this. I'm expecting to see all of the quality on display from the defending factions. Proxima Centuri playing as Arthedain, with some Arthedain marksmen here, some Minhiriath archers, Minhiriath men-at-arms, maybe only basic units here, but they can hold the line well enough, and all of the defending factions today have got the ability to do a lot of damage at range as well. Arthedain marksmen once more. We've got the Greenway Garrison footmen, cheap pikes, but that just means more money to spend elsewhere, and Greenway Garrison archers, the same thing applies to them. Men-at-arms Romen gatekeepers just in behind of one such area you can spend that money as Cardolan, fully upgraded as well. They're very tanky, though the main thing that sets them apart, of course, is the damage they can deal at range with those crossbows. Minhiriath sharpshooters as well, Cardolan adding their crossbows into this defensive effort. Going to be a very important thing indeed for the defenders if they are going to be successful. A second unit of gatekeepers, 2 units of Tharvad warhammers, that's one aspect of them having that money to spend, of course. Dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights, strong especially against the more lightly armoured units of the attackers, as will be the Dunedain Peacekeepers. The shields will protect them a little bit more so from projectiles as well. Arthedain Pikemen, Arthedain Marksmen with the stakes on the front as well, so only the Warg Riders will be affected by those, but still, better safe than sorry. Arthedain Men-at-Arms and Pikes once more, Dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights as we get into the Imladris Elves, played by Joran, so some archers of Rivendell. Even the basic Elven archers have got decent damage scores, of course, but Imladris' main focus is going to be on their melee prowess. The Imladris Sentry is one of the better units of pikes that the game has to offer. Certainly the sort of thing that the attackers will not enjoy having to march through. The fully upgraded Imladris Guardians as well, a fantastic line infantry unit, so the quality, when Imladris have this amount of money to spend, they can be a pretty scary force if they're allowed to dig in, but a fairly small one. Eldarenway Spearmen, Imladris Spearmen, Gwythi Arthand as well, which actually are probably the single tankiest unit of bodyguard spears in the game. Not necessarily the most damaging, but certainly incredibly durable. Eldarenway Swordmaster is very damaging, of course, though when it comes to damage, we've already mentioned armour-piercing bodyguard units. The Gwythi Myrdain certainly count themselves among the very finest of that kind of unit that the game has to offer. Swords and Broinen River Wards going to be able to reinforce the line as and where they're needed. Noratirno warriors here also, and the god Helene. Those silver thorns, of course, will break up any sort of advance. No rangers for Imladris, which means they are going to be here entirely really for their quality up front. But both of the Arthedainian factions, of course, have rangers, so the Anumnus Gate Guards are merely a higher end unit of pikes. So here we can see the Dunedain Rangers and the Dunedain Troll Slayers, along with some Dunedain Peacekeepers as well, all of the Dunedain up here for Arthedain, a Trebuchet crew, the Wardens of the North, and the Dismounted Knights of Anumnus, all of the very best that Arthedain has to offer. And of course the Grey Company, which makes sense. Cavalry for the defenders is often a bit of a sticking point, because if you don't use it well, it can often be a bit of a disaster, but the Grey Company can be used in the same way standard Rangers can, and in fact they can be a little bit more responsive within a slightly bigger settlement like this. Standard Dunedain Rangers from Cardolan. Over here we've got yet more Dunedain Captains, more Thieves of Tharvad, more crossbows as well in the Minhiriath Sharpshooters, and more pikes as well, so a bit of future-proofing here with some units already retreated a little bit further, but I think we're going to be making a little bit of a cut here. I don't think we're going to be seeing an advance. I mean, I may be wrong. It may be that the attackers get down to business right away and don't wait for the Misty Mountains, but we'll see on that front. I mean, the arrow towers are already firing away after all, as you can see from the arrows in mid-flight over here. As a matter of fact, yeah, so I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin perhaps very, very soon. So I think we shall rejoin here as the gates are about to be battered down here on the northern section of the fortress. There has been a little bit of action so far in terms of the walls being crumbled elsewhere, but with this I think we will be starting to see more of a concerted effort by the attackers to actually put some pressure on the defensive lines rather than just preparing the ground, as it were. Indeed, we can see the other rams also being moved up here. Interestingly enough, the arrow towers have been going about their business, and these poor Dunlanding clansmen have been the ones catching all the heat from them, and it's a fair amount of damage that they've done so far. Nothing crippling, of course, and it definitely was intentional from Dunland and from Isengard on the southern section that these were the units that were sent forward first, so that they could be the ones to take the damage from the arrow towers. You can see several of them already falling dead here, and we do actually have the first of the melee engagements as well, with a little bit of a counter-attack from a unit of Swords of Rivendell here from Imladris, and they will be able to carve their way through the Dunlanding clansmen with relative ease. No armour upgrades on the standard Rivendell units, which is interesting. I would have thought Imladris would have had the money to do that perhaps, but if they did invest into some extra quality units instead, then that's probably the wiser choice, because an armour upgrade isn't going to make the difference between beating basic units from the kind of attacking forces they're facing off against here and not doing so. Uruk-hai raiders on their way over, who will at least provide more of a challenge than the Dunlanding clansmen, but they will still lose 1-to-1 with the swords. 2 gaps going to be made in this wall over here, so Uruk-hai very kindly donating more of his artillery ammunition to the southernmost gate, but then he is on his own here in the central lane, so maybe he was going to be a little bit more cautious and allow his allies to take the fore more so than he. But with the Arthedain man-at-arms here also counter-attacking outside, and with a little bit of support coming in from those Arthedain marksmen, it's going to be a very easy task to rout these Dunlanding clans. So they don't want to be using too much of their valuable ammunition on Dunlanding clansmen, however, so there is a fine line between doing the right thing and not here from Proxima Centauri. We'll see how that situation develops. Certainly Dunland will be forced onto the back foot by it. This gate may very well have been battered down, but they have actually retreated from it in the time since. So Angmar still waiting really for the Misty Mountains to arrive, but they will do so, and I actually kind of like the counter-attacking from this perspective from the defenders, because clearly the attackers are not fully ready to begin an assault on all fronts. But they do have units close enough by that can be easily mopped up by even the most basic of the defending infantrymen. We do have the Arthedain marksmen still firing away. The arrow towers also still, slowly but surely, making an impression on this unit of Dunlanding clansmen in reserve here. Stand there in front of the arrow towers and perish is their job. Snaga skirmishers back here, who also wouldn't be a bad choice of target for the Arthedain marksmen. Try and deny some of that armour-piercing support fire, which we have noticed of late has been a real fixture. Swords of Rivendell now, with a little bit of support coming in from those Snaga skirmishers in behind, in combination with the numbers advantage that they have. All of a sudden the elves are being forced onto the back foot fairly significantly. I really do think those javelins are going to be making a big difference. Not the most durable unit in the world, the Swords of Rivendell. The standard Rivendell units in general stand apart really from the rest of the Imladris roster, which of course is pretty damn tanky all round in terms of defence and armour, but Swords of Rivendell have to only make do really with melee defence. Even when the armour is upgraded, it's not exactly doesn't exactly turn them into a steel-clad legion capable of wading through all of the projectiles in the world. Rhudaur now also on the way forward. I mean, this is maybe a little bit of a problem being so close to the arrow towers. They are now burning the catapults one by one. Could prove to be an issue. Rhudaur now charging forwards very quickly. I like this actually. Imladris were clearly not ready for such an aggressive push. I think they were expecting maybe a little bit more of a slower approach, and the Rhudaur swordsmen as a result are going to be able to move in here and make life pretty damn uncomfortable for Imladris. But some archers of Rivendell firing in through the gap. Stuff like the Imladris Guardians are going to be very, very difficult for the Rhudaur swordsmen to face on their own, but as long as this is just the initial wave from Rhudaur, establishing their lines with their basic line infantry, and then maybe something a little bit more damaging comes in afterwards, could make all the difference really. I like this. Nice aggressive push to offset the fact that initially it looked like they were going to be a little bit slower with their approach, and this is a long battle after all as well. But not a bit of it from Rhudaur here, and their Rhudaur clansmen are now in behind enemy lines. They need to be careful not to overextend themselves too much, otherwise they will likely rout in the face of this sort of punishment. I mean, they're going to confront the God Halim in melee, but The God Halim, of course, are easily going to be able to defeat Rhudaur clansmen, especially ones that have been isolated, such as this. In come the Broyne and River wards as well. So this is all well and good, but as long as they follow through with this, it could work out very nicely. If they don't, and they lose all of this manpower without really gaining anything in terms of territory, it could prove to be the moment where the attackers surrendered the momentum in this battle, and it will be quite hard for them to get it back in the south here, without all of these numbers to fall back upon later. Catapult crew being sent in. Out of ammunition as it is, it's just more meat for the grinder. Grey Company nearby. There's still that one unit of Swords of Rivendell fighting valiantly, though they will probably lose, but Rhudaur are going to need the support of their fellows if this is to go any better for them. Isengard will need to pull their weight. Over here, meanwhile, Dunland still not too eager to commit anything further into melee for the time being, so the Arthedain men-at-arms continuing to push back against the Dunlanding clansmen. They've probably got one more melee engagement left in them, and in fact the reason why they've taken this much damage in the first place is once again Snaga skirmishers are in place, doing some decent damage there. And then here in the north, Angmar starting to put the beginnings of an engagement in place to deal with the largely Cardolan-led defence over here. Cardolan, however, ready to constrict on that gatehouse, and it is worth saying as well, no parts of the wall here have been crumbled as of yet. Tharbad Warhammers getting up onto the wall will answer the challenge. Putting the siege towers directly in front of the arrow towers is a rather cunning move as well from Grizzly Fox. But with these two units of Tharbad Warhammers, I mean, they will need to defend both walls, I suspect, but the lack of gaps in the wall in comparison to the push in the south should help Cardolan out, although I say that, they are now actually utilising the Misty Mountains catapult for this purpose. Snaga Stalkers up on the wall. Won't see a more lopsided engagement on the field today, I think, between the Snaga Stalkers and the Tharbad Warhammers. The armour piercing may not be all that useful against the Snaga, but it's not exactly all that important given the calibre of unit they're facing. Arthedain men-at-arms now leaving, their work done. Mostly Dunlanders lie dead on the floor over here now, so decent little engagement that. These things will add up in favour of the defenders as the battle goes on. This is still by far the biggest engagement on the field, however. This engagement even existing as well is a sign that Dunland in the middle and Angmar and the Misty Mountains in the north do need to pick up the pace a little bit, because this is the kind of engagement that forces the hand of both the defenders and the attackers when it comes to dictating the pace of the battle as a whole. And the attackers need to be willing to be as aggressive as this to make this kind of thing worthwhile, because this is also the amount of units that have been committed here. It's the sort of thing which may very well end up not working out so well in the long run for the attackers if things start to go south, and with routing from the Dunlanders. And Uruk-hai Raiders are not going to be on the same sort of level as the Imladris line infantry units they've been tasked with trying to defeat. Forward come yet more Rhudaur clansmen, so they have managed to get through at least that one unit of Swords of Rivendell that was fighting on the outside of the walls. And once again they're using the Rhudaur clansmen as a sort of line breaker unit, but again the morale is not necessarily going to hold together all that well for Rhudaur in the face of the kind of units that they're being asked to deal with. Again, Elder Enway Spearmen, such a tanky unit of Spearmen, and with a bit of range support coming in here as well. We mentioned at the start of the battle the Rhudaur clansmen good at dealing with arrow fire because of those big shields. It's all about, I think, the mental fortitude of their units at this point. And I mean, the setup of the line, this is actually not too bad, but they just need a little bit of quality in here, I think. In comes some Dunman pikemen. Very nice anchor to, oof, dear oh dear. That was the Grey Company there, absolutely scything through the Dunman pikemen. And I said, like, I was about to say the Dunman pikemen would work better if they had a unit to anchor in place, but it's them on their own at the minute. But I don't think it would matter now. Those Grey Company absolutely butchering that whole unit. And that's the beauty of the Grey Company in this kind of battle. Their manoeuvrability is almost really a perfect complement to their body-piercing projectiles, because they don't necessarily need to stay over in this engagement Whereas a unit of standard range that would take them quite a while to get to the other side of the fortress, maybe it would take too long. But the Grey Company, no such problems exist for them. And with that damage done to the Rhudaur clansmen, they're still standing and rather impressively still fighting, without only being shaken as well, not wavering. Holding the elves at arm's length, but they need some support badly. And I don't know if any reinforcements are close enough by at this point to actually come in. I mean, there's some Snaga skirmishers trying to offer their support, some Uruk-hai pikemen as well, but they will understandably be a little bit worried about going in, but they don't really have a choice. I mean, someone's going to have to face the horror that is the Grey Company, and it will probably have to be them. Meanwhile, these Arthedain men-at-arms that were sallying out of the settlement, they will be brought down now. A full-strength unit of half-orc spear guard, far more taxing foe than the Dunlanding clansmen they've been facing up till now, and that will be enough. But still, they would have definitely paid for themselves by taking that engagement. Meanwhile, another very large-scale push now coming in from Angmar. The Barrow-wights being at the centre of it is going to make life very difficult for Cardolan, and this is also where Cardolan's morale may start to be called into question. Angmar, the sort of faction which, especially once they get rolling, can cause a bit of a death spiral for your morale. But that is a lot of projectiles coming in, and Minhiriath archers, men-at-arms, Roman gatekeepers, so standard arrows, crossbow bolts. Those crossbows, as we've mentioned already, the main thing Cardolan brings to the table among the ranks of the defenders here, and even the Barrow-wights are not going to really enjoy being under a withering hailstorm of crossbow bolts like that, and the Witchhelm Hammerguard are at the centre of this push, so Angmar not messing around right from the off here. They're really going to be testing this largely Minhiriath front line that Cardolan have laid on for them, which in melee terms, Cardolan should be struggling pretty badly here, but it's that range support which is going to make the difference. Some Dunedain captains up on the wall. Victory still seems certain for them. They are outnumbered pretty heavily by Snaga and by those Guardians of Carn, but with some range support and of course with their own quality, they're still holding on to the wall, preventing more reinforcements from filtering down, or indeed going off this way and potentially getting into the skirmish line, although I think that's more a result of Angmar not noticing that they could go down this section and start interrupting all of the skirmishers that Cardolan have. The trolls are in here now, but in response, 2 times commits his Tharbad Warhammers as well, the ideal unit really for trying to bring trolls down. The trolls trying to get through the lines to interrupt the skirmishers as well. One of them at the very least has made it, albeit the Thieves of Tharbad there actually did hit him with several projectiles. Fortunately as well for Cardolan, Proxima is on hand to lend a hand with these dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights, another good anti-troll unit, more cave trolls coming in, so this a very, very violent brawl here, more so perhaps than even the Rhudaur Isengard one. The trolls getting into this section of the line, and most of the units over here are ill prepared to deal with trolls, even slightly weaker ones like cave trolls will bludgeon their way through out of ammunition Greenway archers and Minhiriath men-at-arms. The central gate is finally battered down as well. The trolls getting in behind enemy lines, although again the Minhiriath sharpshooters with their maces will be able to defend themselves a little bit better perhaps than the Minhiriath archers they were going after previously. The gatekeepers as well with armour piercing, so they're trying to jump on the trolls as quickly as possible to now finish them off. And that is, I think, the right thing to do. Try and secure your back lines. I think the final unit of Minhiriath men-at-arms they had in reserve committed to try and keep the cave trolls in check, although again more of a desperation play that. So far so good though for Cardolan. Their line is holding, but it is a very fine margins here. Cardolan could end up crumbling under this sort of pressure fairly quickly, given the pretty decent quality of the Angmar units that have been committed, fighting with the fervour to reclaim their capital. Tharbad Warhammer's easily winning that particular fight. Arthedain Spearguard now coming in through the central gate as well. Dunland trying to put the pressure on in multiple areas, and perhaps seeing some of the dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights moving to the aid of Cardolan. This is a good idea from Dunland to at least make sure that Arthedain know they can't afford to send too many reinforcements to assist their 2 allies. They need to take Dunland into account as well. But the pike line, and with those swordsmen ready to meet the challenge, simply going to get into formation by the looks of things and give each other the eye. Meanwhile, you can see that things have actually calmed down a little bit over here relative to what they were before, and a large part of that is simply because the attackers may be starting to run out of steam a little bit. Worrying signs for them, perhaps. They've got stuff like Uruk-hai infantry in here now, which will do a better job, but Archers of Rivendell still sending arrows into the frontline engagement. The Broinen River Wards, who so far have been a pretty damn dependable unit, carving their way through, especially the basic Rhudaur units. They would be very good against them, and they've proven it here. The Isengard units will be able to withstand them a little bit better, but with that range support, even still, I don't know. There's still a lot of attackers out there, though. You can see that they do still extend pretty far back, so Imladris are going to have to be prepared to do a little bit more of this if they are to hold on to the main gatehouse, and if the defenders are to retreat from the first layer, it needs to be a universal decision, otherwise some units could end up being surrounded and cut off as a result. Snaga skirmishers taking hits, and there's enough for Arthedain marksmen to go after them. Dunedain troll slayers launching some projectiles in as well. Baneguard joining the spear guard, but having to also meet the Dunedain peacekeepers in melee. So Dunland with a fair few units in here, but this, of all of the gates to attack, is probably the most difficult, purely because the defenders have got access to a perfect position to put their skirmishers in, and Dunland being on their own over here does mean that they have a pretty difficult task. But like I said, they need to at least engage with Arthedain, so Arthedain don't feel as though they can commit reinforcements freely to the two other gates. Pikemen moving in as well, so it's going to be difficult for Dunland this, but they have managed to engage with the marksmen and force them onto the back foot. Tharbad Warhammers, looks like they are going to go down onto ground level. By the looks of things, yeah, you can see here the Blackwatch Legion have pushed through the front line, and this has made things a little bit dicey for Cardolan once again. If the Misty Mounds and Angmar have got more reinforcements to send in, now would be the time, because Cardolan would not withstand reinforcements following in through the gap that the Blackwatch Legion have made. You can see there some Snaga Stalkers engaging with the Tharbad Warhammers up on the walls as they were trying to actually come down to help with the main engagement. The Gatekeepers tangled up in melee with a unit that is already routing. More arrows, more crossbow bolts. The Barrow-wights still up, although this is a fresh unit of them. There is also the extremely depleted one that's in here as well. Pikes are moving in. This is going to be the unit they're going to use to try and consolidate the gains they've made with that mass pushing unit. It could be a very key part of the battle list, because if the attackers can make this stick, then the momentum inevitably on the first layer will shift in their favour. If they can, however, I'm not sure whether they've got the stuff left to be able to do that again. Dismounted Fornoster Rhine Knights having already assisted with the trolls in the backfield, which have been dealt with, are now going to join onto the front line as well to help their neighbours in Cardolan. We recently saw a civil war between Arthedain and Cardolan, of course, but today, as they should be, fighting on the same side. Thieves of Tharbad getting into melee as well. Probably won't be too bad actually against the Barrow-wights, the Thieves of Tharbad. Decent damage, decent melee defense. Pikes getting into place. Once again, I don't know if these Gatekeepers are out of ammunition or not, but getting into melee with them and taking away that choice if they did have ammunition left. But some Benhiriath archers out of ammunition as well, charging forwards, engaging with the Scourge Raiders. Similar story with the Arthedain marksmen, so lots of archers that are out of ammunition here, but lots more numbers as well which can be committed to the defence, which may be enough considering the rather thinly spread nature of the attackers as they've tried to take advantage of the gaps that they have made. And there are still some projectiles being utilised by Cardolan as well, which may still be needed with more Barrow-wights and also the Witch Realm Blackguard making their way to the front line as well, so no rest for the weary. The pressure will continue. Victory seems certain for the Dunedain captains. Over here, meanwhile, doesn't look like things have gone all that well for the Dunlanders either. Getting into melee now, the Dunedain Troll Slayers finishing off the half-orcs that were trying to engage with the ranged unit core that Arthedain were utilising, but Troll Slayers, of course, more than capable of looking after themselves. Dunland Peacekeepers' victory seems certain as well. They've taken a little bit more in terms of damage. We can see now something a little bit scarier making its way forwards as well in the shape of the Black Walls. Interesting to see that the Misty Mountains have also come down here with a little bit of support from heavy goblin halberdiers, which is all well and good. But the presence of Arthedain pikemen is going to make life a little bit more difficult over here. Meanwhile, Dunland, and especially with the snow trolls over here, putting Arthedain under some significant pressure, even with the Fornoster Rhine Knights here, the kind of pressure that those half-orcs and the snow trolls are putting on this little section of line. Substantial, and then they can go to the aid, of course, of the Southgate and try and help move the Imladris units here. Imladris slightly repositioning themselves as a result of this. Blackwolds from Rhudaur. Arthedain Rangers firing in as well, having to bank their shots but still hitting the Elder Enway Spearmen. Another force of Uruk-hai infantry actually getting into melee against the Imladris sentries there before they were able to get set. That will change over time, of course, but I think the attackers are probably feeling a lot more cautious about engaging down here now, which is fair enough, but I'm not sure they can afford to be. I mean, Imladris are a scary force once they're dug in, as we've already seen, but these are fine margins here. It's one of those situations where the defenders have very clearly been doing a lot of damage to the attackers, but one passage of play could turn all that around in a 5v3. And the attackers have to be the ones to force that particular issue. Snow trolls are now being laid low. They aren't quite as strong as the armoured trolls from the other factions, and Arthedain marksmen down here as well. In comes some Dunman pikemen to try and go pike to pike. Trollshore axe throwers in place as well. This is exactly the kind of unit which, if you allow them free reign, are going to be able to do crippling levels of damage to a defensive position, and they are going after the pikes, which is exactly the sort of unit they're very, very strong against. Dunland Trollslayers still there. Arthedain marksmen trying to shoot them, I believe, but it's easier said than done as things get a little bit more chaotic. With the support of the Misty Mountains over here, they could have the numbers to worry Arthedain, unless Arthedain have got some reinforcements on hand. Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers are routing, which is probably a bad sign. Only Minhiriath archers remain in the backfields over here. They might have the numbers to be able to win that fight. Ooh, the Witchers. The Witchers have done their work, and it is the Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers that they did grill. Out of ammunition as they were, but again, that is a fairly deadly amount of damage that's been done there. We missed it, but once again, the Witchers may very well have their say in the outcome of this particular fight. Greenway Garrison footmen standing in the way of the further advance of the heavy goblins. We're seeing more and more of the Misty Mountains as the battle goes on now. G-Man starting to take a more active role in things. I mean, the Greenway Garrison footmen can stand in the way, but they are a little bit scattered. Heavy goblin spears can use their mass to burrow into this unit and then take advantage of the fact that basic pikes like this often have absolute dreadful stats. And here we have sharpshooters firing away, although I really question whether it's worthwhile going after Snagar archers with your valuable crossbow bolts, but it's more kills, I suppose. Meanwhile, the Dunland captains, it's been a slog for them, but they've at least been victorious. Can they retreat, however? Can they be saved for later? Exactly the sort of unit which could well be very, very useful. Potential difference makers. 32 Dunland captains. Certainly not the sort of thing you can afford to surrender without response. The trebuchet now in position. So this is one of the reasons why this is such a awkward place to try and take. Those projectiles coming in and really doing a lot of damage to those units moving through the gatehouse, and considering most of them are the Misty Mountains ones as well, unsurprisingly the heavy goblins among them are routing off. The Black Wolves won't. Berserker class units of course have got that locked morale to fall back on, but if they have no support they'll very quickly be dealt with just as they are. Gwathlo trackers and Trollshore axe throwers trying to do the business against the Troll Slayers. It's not the most efficient use of the axe throwers ammunition, that, just based on the angle and based on the cover, but I mean they are hitting at the very least, so it's better than nothing. With the trolls gone, the momentum for the attackers in this little engagement has started to falter. Victory seems certain, only a fool could lose this battle. Arthedain marksmen thinking about moving forwards to support their pikes. Trying to bank their shots and hit the trebuchet there. Dunland Rangers close by also. Again, they would be more accurate if they went for the non-flaming shot, but it's one of those things that if you don't know it, I mean, it's a difficult shot to make, certainly not impossible. Ooh, some of the Troll Slayers getting hit as well, so maybe not the intended target, but they are hitting things. Blackwolds from Rhudaur moving in, so starting to find gaps here. Lots of the Imladris forces have retreated back to readying themselves to retreat back to the second layer, I think, which is what's happening generally now that Cardolan, I think, have been forced off that main gate. That is the sort of thing they should be looking a little bit more to do. Even still, Imladris are holding their ground resolutely against the kind of units that are here, which has a fair few damage-focused infantry units over here as well, so that goes to show the quality that Imladris are often working with. Archers of Rivendell being sent forward again, maybe a little bit of a waste this. I mean, they can still be useful as part of a combined front line with other things, but if they're pinning them in place to try and let the archers from on high shoot them, then fair enough, I suppose, but the Baneguard, full strength as they are, should be able to brush aside a unit of Archers of Rivendell. They're merely here to stand in the way. Further back over here, still a decent amount of Imladris Guardians as well, so it's not been a full retreat from Imladris, but enough of one that the attackers should really be smelling blood and going all in, I think. Still have reinforcements out here after all. Still more pikes, Tramin Slavers and Uruk-hai Berserkers, Nazkai and Guards of Orthanc, so more and more it's going to be the elite attacking units that they have left later on. Blackwolds attacking from the rear as well, that will be enough to destroy this little pocket of Arthedainian resistance. And yeah, retreating back now to the hill with the Witchround Blackguard over here. Gwathlo trackers in a good position as well to do some nice damage. Arthedain pikemen backed up against the wall, surrounded by goblins and Blackwolds. All these heavy goblin halberds are still perpetually routing from the damage the trebuchet did to them earlier. But over here, it is a bit of a strange situation we find ourselves in, with Imladris and Cardolan still technically contesting the first layer, even though the gates have fallen. And I mean, perhaps it's something to be said for the attackers not flooding over them with the required numbers yet, and so the defenders are merely taking advantage of that fact. But it's a dangerous game to be playing, because at any moment they could simply overwhelm them. The fact that there are still Witchram Hammerguard alive, considering they were a part of the very first Angmar push, is a testament to how tough they can be with that armour upgrade as well, I think. Although I don't know if they're going to last too much longer, seeing as they are now having to face halberdiers head on. They go fairly poorly for them. The pikes have managed to get into a good position as well and force the spears back, with some Dunland Rangers in position as well to help them hold the line. Barrow-wights slowly falling, but of course Barrow-wights are one of those tools which make maintaining your position on a front line as Angmar far easier than many other factions have it. They won't rout, they'll stand there and fight to the bitter end, and that bitter end is a long time coming. The tracker's still in a good position, but slowly forcing the enemy back here. No extra ammunition needed to deal with Arthedain marksmen, considering it is Witchround Blackguard that are now engaging them in melee. Would come the Dunman pikes. Securing much of the first layer now. Really just the prelude to the ramps upwards, and even on this side Imladris have decided to fully retreat now, which is probably for the best. And they still have a good amount of units left as well, so that sort of preemptive leaving of some of the units back up here may very well end up being for the best. They've got pikes, they've got some really strong infantry units as well. Both of their bodyguard tier units, Eldoranway units. Not the most numerous force, but Imladris never are. And I don't know if the attackers have got enough to thoughtlessly mass push forwards any longer. The trebuchet is going to make this a less attractive proposition for the attackers, to be sure. Wardens. Cardolan, are they going to retreat now? Looks like they're still sending forward drips and drabs of units over here, which is surprising. Still the Greenway Garrison footmen. It says defeat seems certain, but they're not actually taking much in the way of damage from the units they're facing off against, so that would actually flick around the other way in the event that no other units involve themselves in this fight. The Minotaur Rhine Gatekeepers are over here a little bit scattered. What are they doing, I wonder? Going after the heavy goblin crossbows? I mean, I'd be surprised. The Gatekeepers behind enemy lines, they may be a high tier unit, but they are still able to be routed. Cardolan being what they are. And going after both the heavy goblin archers and the crossbows, so trying to whittle down the kind of range support the attackers want to be enjoying later on. Which is fair enough, I guess. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. Only 14 of them left. Standard goblin archers. When you look at the kind of units that are left, there's obviously the odd bodyguard unit here and there, but I mean, do they have reinforcements out here? Kind of, but not to the same extent that Rhudaur and Isengard had them in the south, so it took a lot out of Angmar and the Misty Mountains to get this far. Cardolan will probably be fancying their chances moving forwards, which is perhaps why they're trying to counter-attack and go after some of those ranged units, try and prevent any sort of annoyances later. Dunland pikemen facing the wrong way, leaving the heavy goblin infantry to their fate, as Arthedain once again are going to be manning this hill. The Undyne peacekeepers on the front will easily be able to deal with the basic Misty Mountains and Dunland units that are here. They're practically tailor-made for facing this kind of foe. Extra damage from those axes. Blackwolds on their way across. Try and help out the northern armies. What is that unit then? The god Helene? Going after the Witch Realm enslavers, knocking them over as they do so, so it's going to be more difficult for them to get out of the way. And they are taking a fair amount of damage as well. So they will be less useful than they otherwise would have been, but I mean, you can see here that this may very well be where the attackers are at their strongest. In spite of the initial struggles perhaps from that first Rhudaur wave against Imladris, the slightly more measured approach they went with seems to have served them slightly better than Angmar and the Misty Mountains in the north. But they still have the small matter of having the best that Imladris has to offer still standing in their way on the second layer. So that may yet prove to be too much for them, even with their extra reserves. Spears of Orthanc moving, as yeah, the armor-piercing projectiles going after them. So it's about picking and choosing your targets wisely from here on in for the defenders, I would suggest. And now with less support on hand and with more of the attacking units arriving, I don't think the Greenway Garrison footmen are going to hold on for too much longer. With a little bit of a surround as well from the Guardians of CARN, that will surely be enough to rout them, and it is. So now they do have an open path to the second layer, though I think they will need to organise themselves before they go again. They may even need a little bit of support from Dunland, honestly. The side paths may be a safer bet than this middle one, especially considering they don't seem to be doing a great job at stopping this counter-attack from the peacekeepers. They're going to be relying, I think, on the range damage of the Gwathlo trackers to help them do the business there. They do still have those wargs, but I don't know if, like standard war riders, if it was skirmishers, they would have the javelins and then they could be used to charge in, but simply charging in, I don't think there's going to be too many opportunities to do that. Grey Company still alive as well. They took a little bit of damage at some point though, but must have missed. One Imladris Guardian remains, ready to lead the defence. What will the attackers do over here? Are they waiting for their brethren in the north to get in position as well? Fall upon the defences all at once? I think that's probably the best way for the attackers to go about this now. I think they just need to attack all at once and then maybe that will be enough. Heavy Goblin crossbows still alive. They've still got the catapult as well. Don't know how much ammunition it necessarily has left. Arthedain marksman helping the Dunland peacekeepers, but with Witchround Blackguard here, that might be a little bit too much. Especially with that range support coming in, though the slightly questionable accuracy is probably also doing a bit of damage to their own units here. Bit of friendly fire sustained. Reforged Spear Guard. They have the support units, I think, the attackers. It's just whether or not they have the strength up front to be able to break the defences. Grey Company are moving down the hill. And I suppose, why not? Crownvine Rangers undefended. The Grey Company must have used all their ammunition up earlier on against Rhudaur and Isengard as well, so definitely been the bane of their existence. Not the finest charge in the world, but then Horse Archers not exactly designed for this sort of thing in the first place. More of an annoyance than anything else, this, for the attackers to have to deal with. As the rain continues to fall. Yeah, Imladris, I mean the trebuchet is coming over here as well, so identifying this front line as the one which could probably use the trebuchet support the most. Though that should be like a red rag to a bull. I think the forces of Dunland and what is left of the Misty Mountains over here now should be ready to try and really push aggressively up this hill without the trebuchet there, because that would be the main worry. And now that it has moved, they should be looking to take advantage of that, although take advantage of it with what? A unit of Dunman pikemen? And that's probably about it, unless they want to commit their Gwathlo trackers to melee. They need something to commit up here, surely. Do the attackers have enough left, or are they going to be spreading themselves too thin on every front? The final 10,000 frames we are now within, so I don't think we're going to be seeing the third and final layer of Carn Doom today. I think the defenders will be content to end this battle one way or another on the second layer. And that's probably for the best, I think, because trying to fall back too much would not be the answer here, I don't think. Once again, the Grey Company being used to charge downhill. How much damage they're actually doing is questionable, but I mean, you may as well. They're not going to find any other use, really. Any additional kills they can get would be worth it. Clearly going to try and use their skirmishers first and foremost here, Rhudaur, but it's going to be difficult to do so, because in order to get the right kind of angle, you're going to need to be so close to the elves that they're clearly going to counter-attack into you. Although they do have their hand axes out, the Rhudaur marksmen. At least the first unit of them does. They may as well start using their ammunition from this angle, to be honest. It's not the best of angles, but it will start doing a little bit of damage. It will open proceedings over here on what is likely to be the decisive engagement going into the end game. That one Imladris Guardian getting in the way of them. Rhudaur marksman charging in, but the Norrtuno warriors, this is where their extra melee capabilities should help them out. The trebuchet getting very close. Needs to be good interplay here from Arthedain and Imladris. Imladris need to be willing to defend that trebuchet, because it could be absolutely vital. In conjunction with that quality that the elves have in melee. Only half the enemy force. Which of them? Who knows? Still not willing to move up through the central lane here, but again, the quality that's on display. Wardens, Troll Slayers, Peacekeepers, all Dunland class units waiting for them at the top of this hill, but they're not going anywhere, so you're going to need to puzzle through it somehow. Over here, maybe slightly less scary, the Cardolan forces, still Dunland captains, Cardolan more taken out of them perhaps in that initial assault, but that went for the attackers as well. A more violent engagement here in the north, so there is an Elven unit and an Arthedainian unit in the Numinous Gate Guards ready to hold the line. Heavy Goblin crossbows in place, but so too of them in Hiriath sharpshooters, and the numbers being what they are, you'd back Cardolan here. Thieves of Tharbad as well. Wonder if they have ammunition. We saw one unit used earlier on, but I mean, this could be the beginnings of the engagement, to be honest. The Trebuchet is exposed though, which is a little bit worrying. Elder Renway Swordmasters having to deal with the Mountain Orc Berserkers and Rhudaur Marksmen, both of which they should be pretty good against, so if the attackers are going to be victorious with this kind of unit, it will need to be with overwhelming numbers. Wythy Arthand, of course. The spears that are so hard to kill, and they will prevent the Rhudaur clansmen from moving further forwards. Forward come the White Uruk Fearmongers. They are more of a problem. That phalanx that they possess, a worry. I think more of Imladris need to be a little bit careful that they don't take the attacking force here too lightly. Those Elder Renway archers are in a good position, however, to shoot into the backs of those White Uruk Fearmongers, so that is very, very good. Trebuchet and Pikes still here, another unit of Imladris Guardians. They don't have a limitless supply of manpower here, the elves, but what they do have is good quality, and I think now, yeah, I mean, the exposed nature of the Trebuchet there did surprise me a little bit. I mean, partly you can say why are Imladris not structuring their lines better, but also I'd say I don't know why Proxima Centauri has brought the Trebuchet so close to the action. Medieval 2 artillery is well known for being pretty unresponsive when it comes to trying to get them out of trouble quickly, so brought this upon himself really, unfortunately for him. Defeat seems certain, only a military genius could win this battle. The Vanguard could end up routing in the face of this elven resistance after all. Looks like those Elder Renway archers just ran out of ammunition. They pulled out their swords. Uruk-hai pikemen, so yeah, more projectiles coming in. There's a lot of high quality units in here now for the attackers. Uruk-hai berserkers taking hits from the Noratuno warriors. I'm sure that the Dunland Troll Slayers will also be around to launch their javelins in, but like I said, this really is going to be, I think, the decisive engagement on the battlefield, so the Trebuchet has managed to get out of there, so that could be key. A couple of hits from the Trebuchet can send the lower tier units in this particular assault routing, and then the elite units can be picked off in a more even numbered engagement by Imladris. Point blank shots, but the Guards of Orthanc, one of the most archer resistant units that the attackers have got on the field today. Not so much against javelins though. Dunland Troll Slayers will be very, very well placed to whittle down a unit of bodyguard spears like this. Blackwall's moving in as well. Still more reinforcements can be provided. Trebuchet is still trying to get into place. I mean, this can be very frustrating when you have an artillery piece and it simply won't cooperate with you, but so far I think the defenders are going to be okay anyway. Mighty Mirdain are there. What have we got going on the other side? Yeah, the engagements have begun, and indeed it was the wargs that tried to open things up over here to start with by the looks of it. Man-at-Arm Roman Gatekeepers. In Hiriath Man-at-Arms as well, facing off against the goblins in close melee. Forward come the Rangers. Still got reinforcements. I'm a little bit surprised, honestly, that this is what they've decided to go with, more of a sacrificial front line here, Cardolan, because if the attackers really wanted to, they could lurch forward and really worry the defensive line over here. So, I mean, better late than never, I suppose. The Elder Renway Spearmen are on their way across now to prevent the Spears of Orthanc from firing their crossbow bolts. And they will be stopped from firing that volley. Spears of Orthanc will still beat Eldarenway Spearmen 1-to-1 though. They are the strongest unit Dunland have to offer after all. So I do still think more reinforcements will be necessary. Dunedain captains would be ideal. That would definitely tilt the balance of power on this side. And then over here, another counter-attack from Arthedain. Trying to force the hand of the units that still remain over here. Peacekeepers clearing the walls. The dismounted Knights of Anumanas leading the way against the lowly goblins that are still over here. So this central lane could end up being completely cleared out as a result of being undermanned. The heavy goblin crossbows will be hoping to get some good shots on these bodyguard tier units as this happens, but this does place more emphasis for the attackers on the two flanks, and especially this one, and I don't really think it's going to end the way the attackers want, with those Arthedainian units not needing to be in the middle. Wards of the North and Troll Slayers heading over here to assist Imladris. That could prove to be vital. Gwaithir Myrdain back into the fray as well. Nazkai, I mean, all of the strongest units the attackers have left really being sent in to try and make something happen. The elves moving forward once more. Eldarenway archers. And the pikes as well. Cardolan pikemen trying their best, but as good a pike unit as they are outmatched here 1-to-1, and the structure of the engagement being as messy as it is, it actually isn't in favour of the attackers for once. The defenders are far more organised, whereas the attackers struggling a little bit more. Those armour-piercing arrows being used on the backs of the Nazkai, giving the Gwaithir Myrdain the boost that they need to be victorious here. Plenty of routing going on, and with this engagement going the way that it is, I do believe we are seeing the beginnings of a defender victory in a 5v3 for the first time in a while. Blackwald's defeat seems certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. And yeah, I think that, I mean, we'll talk about what actually happened in the endgame splash screen here, but the attackers, on the face of things, haven't really done a whole lot wrong. Organisationally, maybe things could have gone a little bit better for them, but these were all fairly minor things, and in a 5v3 you kind of expect those minor things to not add up to be quite so troublesome for them as they have ended up being. But I guess you have to give credit for the defenders where it's due as well. They certainly committed their resources fairly wisely. More units being sent forward now. Yeah, Numinous Gate Guards, I think they see committing forward what they have left now to prevent once and for all Dunland trying to make something happen over on this choke point as well is definitely the way to go. Fork Spear Guard. The Goblin King's bodyguard fighting as well. There's still Barrow-wights left alive, as often there are with Angmar. I don't know if the Witches are still around, but if they were, then maybe they could be a bit of a difference maker, but it's not looking like that's the case at the moment. Nothing left over here after that very violent encounter between Cardolan and the two Orcish factions. Heavy Goblin crossbows being sent in. What's left of Arthedain over here, far higher tier, easily enough to deal with a single unit of heavy goblin crossbows here at the main gate. There's still that unit of Guathlo trackers up here, though they've been out of ammunition for a while, I think, so they're hardly the melee tour de force that the defenders may very well need to turn this one around. Snaga using their javelins, bit of a counter-attack here from Imladris, which isn't going to be without its dangers, but I think that the momentum is theirs. A downhill charge, sweeping aside. That's not Rhudaur or Isengard. Is it the Misty Mountains? No? Angmar or Dunland? I mean, those Barrow Whites are pretty much the only thing Angmar had left, so... No, it must be Hatumihai. That's a little bit disappointing. Still had his Spears of Orthanc left. I mean, it wasn't going to be enough to win the battle in the long run, but... his units were probably the strongest left on the field, to be honest with you. That one unit of Spears of Orthanc, probably the best thing the attackers had remaining to them. Now gone. We will go up to ×2 speed, I think, because it is now just going to be a case of slow clean-up. Barrow White's got another player amidst defeat. I would assume that was probably the Misty Mountains. Although, perhaps not. No. Who, then? Whom? Could it be... it's got to be one of Isengard or Rhudaur, I suppose. Oh, yeah, I guess it's Isengard. Players admitting defeat left, right and centre. But it's understandable at this point. I mean, there's no coming back from this, and I think the only army that's left now still fighting is Rhudaur. The first one's in through the breaches in the walls. The last one's left fighting in there. There's bragging rights, I suppose, in that, but like I said, it's not as if the attackers play badly on the whole, I don't think. A bunch of small things added up in the end to lead to this result, I would suggest. Wardens of the North. Witch-Realm Enslavers still alive. I mean, I'm not really a big fan of this. Like, just send your Witch-Realm Enslavers in. They're not going to achieve anything, so Benny Hill theme music playing while you run away from the enemy is kind of just a little bit poor. ×6 speed it will have to be. And I guess we'll just wait for the endgame splash screen over the backdrop of CARN Doom in the pouring rain. There goes the Rhudaur General. And a defending victory in a 5v3, which, like I said, we haven't seemed to have that in quite a while. And everyone's always a big fan of when Imladris is able to pull off a victory in this kind of setting. So this one will probably go down pretty well, and as well it should, because I think the defenders played pretty damn well here. They were able to showcase the benefits of having a high quality army like Imladris, having some varied skirmisher powers like Cardolan do, and obviously the well balanced approach of Arthedain is also always well appreciated too. And as for the attackers, I mean, you could argue, I suppose, that Angmar and the Misty Mountains' initial aggressive push didn't go as well as it could have done, but I feel like that's kind of Angmar's bread and butter, though. Like, you're going to do that sort of thing, and in the end, the Witches, and they did claim a victory over there, maybe not by the sort of margin they needed to. In the middle, Dunland did the right thing, I think, by being a little bit more cautious, because being very aggressive in through that central gate, given the lay of the land there, it's going to end pretty badly for you. And then Rhudaur and Isengard, initially they had some difficulties as well, but in the end they were the ones that claimed maybe the most efficient outer layer victory of all the attackers that there were. So it's just a matter of the small things adding up here, I think, and also the defenders playing very well. They definitely picked their targets with their ranged units very, very nicely, the defenders, and that is often something that they tend to do wrong. Very often we see the defenders kind of panic a little bit and just dump all their ammunition early, which initially makes it look like they're doing very well, which is kind of what I feared would be happening here. But in the end, no. They were able to ration out their ammunition just so, so that the attackers never really had any respite from that. So let's see what did the damage for Cardolan then. Dunland captains up on the wall doing very nicely. One unit of them was only really used later on. Greenway Garrison footmen again, two very different fates for them. Dunland Rangers was 647. That's the kind of kill count you need to be seeing from a unit which the defenders kind of have to use as a crutch in the current version of the game, and especially in a 5v3 like this, so very, very nice. Minhiriath Sharpshooters and Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers getting a pretty decent kill count all around. Tharbad Warhammers, again, one getting nearly 300 kills, that initial one. Thieves of Tharbad, one unit maybe not paying for itself, but the other one doing decently. And then the Archers as well, just chipping in where they could. So can't ask for too much more. Cardolan, especially given the kind of assault that they faced, actually withstood it better than I thought they would. That morale of theirs, managing to hold together for the most part enough to the point where Angmar and the Misty Mountains couldn't really take full advantage of it on that northern assault. But yeah, big thank you to 2 times for sending this one in. He sent me a bunch actually, and we will be going through those over the course of the next couple of weeks, perhaps couple of months even as well, because there are 4 others that he gave me, so they're going to be spread out here and there as well. I think, well, this isn't going to be the very last battle, I think, of 2022. This one is going to be the one just after Christmas. Maybe it will be, I don't know. But it's one of those. It's been an interesting kind of year. The last video that I released before this, I think, should have been the channel update, and more context can be found in there. And I would highly recommend that you watch that if you're interested in what's going to be happening with the channel in 2023, just because good information is in there, and I don't want to be mentioning it at the end of every splash screen like I have been for the last few months that a channel update is on the way. You know, that's where the information can be found. It's not the most festive of Christmas Eve channel updates, I must say, but again, it's kind of reflective of the whole year, to be honest. And 2023 has the potential to be significantly better, and we can only hope. But yeah, a pretty good way to be one of the last battles to send 2022 off with, at the very least. As for what's coming up next, I have a battle from Tommy the Wise on Minas Falath, which I think will be the very next one, bit of a chaotic one. Following on from that, we'll be doing a historical battle on Minas Tirith, and then I've got a series of battles I can do following on from that as well. Like, I've got more from the Flame of Arnor, I've got more from Tommy the Wise, like I said, I've got more from 2 times. Plenty to be getting on with, and in the new year at some point as well, we'll be hopefully doing the Sword Cavalry knockout tourney as well. But yeah, big thank you to 2 times and all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me